So let's talk about editing video. If you're a podcaster, and especially if you've edited your own show, you probably already know enough. It's very, very similar in a lot of ways. But I do want to cover some of the ways in which they are different. And let's actually just start off with software. So the big three, in my opinion, are Premiere Pro. This is part of the Adobe CC suite. I think you can also subscribe to it separately. I don't know. Those always cost like 20 to 50 bucks a month for like Adobe CC. But if you already have that, especially if you already use Adobe Audition for editing podcasts, well, there you go, Premiere Pro. Final Cut Pro is the Mac only video editing software. It's kind of the step up from iMovie, if you will. I don't actually like iMovie, but it'll totally work too, to be honest with you. Final Cut Pro, one-time payment, $300-400 bucks. That's actually what I use. So we're going to look at that just in a second. In fact, I already have it open. I'll show it to you. And there's only really one other one that I really recommend. But before I get to DaVinci, Filmora. Filmora is pretty cost effective. I've never used it, but I hear really good things about it. So I can't recommend it because I've never used it, but I do hear good things there. Filmora. But okay, DaVinci Resolve. This is what I recommend. It's free. And not only is it free, but I mean, it's really free. It's not like feature limited free. No, it's really free. And in fact, it's actually more powerful, in my opinion, than Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro. Now, the downside is that it's harder to use. You can't just jump in here and like know where everything is. It's not super intuitive. But honestly, if you are a podcaster already, you could probably watch 30 minutes worth of YouTube videos on DaVinci Resolve and you'll be fine. And it's free and it's super powerful. I use Final Cut Pro most of the time, but I even have DaVinci Resolve on my computer and use it. Even though Final Cut Pro is like already bought and paid for and I use it all the time. DaVinci Resolve is really great. It really is. I suggest learning on that one. But just to show you a few things, I'm going to use Final Cut Pro. One more thing is syncing audio and video. So there is a tool called Plural Eyes. It is paid, but that's not it. Plural Eyes. It is paid. My wife is a teacher, so I got the special education thing, which is essentially free. So if there's anybody in your like close family who's a teacher or a student or something, and you can use their email address, like I don't want to tell you not to pay them, but honestly, it's so cool and it's free, essentially. So this syncs audio and video. If you have audio from whatever you're using to podcast or you're recording into a Zoom recorder or whatever, and you're recording video through your DSLR onto an SD card or something, you might want to sync audio and video for the YouTube thing, right? Plural Eyes does it the best, and it's amazing. But even if you don't have Plural Eyes, most of these softwares right here have some sort of audio video sync. In fact, I know Final Cut Pro does because I've used it before. There is a way to select the audio, select the video clip, and then somewhere up here, I honestly can't remember what it was because it's been a while. I think it's under like clip. You might have to Google it, honestly. But it is up here. You can, I really don't see it. That's kind of frustrating. But there's a way to sync audio and video. In fact, I think there's a way in Premiere Pro too. When in doubt, go to Google and type in Premiere Pro Audio Video Sync. And it'll probably show you how to do it. If it's not like a one-click solution, it'll show you the best way to do it possible. There you go. Or if you can afford it and you do a lot of video, do Plural Eyes because it's insanely cool. It's just like you drag and drop video files and audio files on here. You hit sync and then you hit export and then it creates new files. And you can actually export timelines for Final Cut Pro or DaVinci or Premiere Pro or whatever too. It's really powerful. Okay, moving off of software just for a second. I want to talk about the basic edits. So you're a podcaster, you can probably find your way around these tools. I really want to do a cop out and say, I'm not going to teach you how to edit video on your software. That would be an inefficient use of both of our times. You should go to Google or YouTube and learn how to do it. 1 or 2 videos would be more than enough to get your basic podcast with video edited and then exported and then uploading to YouTube. It really would. So go learn on YouTube. I know it's a cop out, but there you go. That said, I do have a few tips for you here. Number one, just 2 edits really are the first things you need to know. I'm actually going to start a new project file here in Final Cut Pro. I'm just going to call it test. It's going to be like a blank thing. I have a blank timeline down here. I'm actually just going to grab, hang on, let's go to open screen recordings. Recordings. Oh, okay, never mind. I don't know where that stuff is. Let me just grab a video. I just need a video. Here's a video right here. Oh, it's all like a long one. Whatever. Just go drag this video in on my timeline. I didn't even do the import. You can go learn how to import or whatever. I just need some test footage down here. Here's my basic timeline. There are only two things you need to learn how to do ASAP. Number one, move clips around. And number two, split or cut videos. I guess you also need to learn like how to zoom in and zoom out and then pan and stuff. Look up the shortcuts for whatever software you're using. I'm not going to talk about that. But cut, so I'm going to use the blade tool. I do this by pressing B, and that is where I can cut things. If you're a podcaster, you know what this does, right? And then moving clips around. And you can see in Final Cut Pro, pretty much everything is on like ripple delete all the time. Obviously, the video that's on top is the one actually showing on the screen, overlaying the one that's on bottom right here. But those are the only two. You need to learn how to move stuff around. Oops. Sorry. You need to learn how to cut and move stuff around. That's pretty much it. And then I'm going to go ahead and recommend learning how to do like a basic title. I don't think you need to learn a bunch of transitions, effects right off the bat, but a good title is always good. A good title is always good. Way to go, Pete. Well done. Final Cut Pro comes with a bunch built in. I usually just use like a basic one. And one other tip I have here is to create templates whenever you can. So this is a basic title. Basic title. You can see up here, I've created a few templates. A red title, a white title. I have one for my brand fonts and stuff like that. Cool. And just learn how to like move this stuff around and resize it and that sort of stuff. Titles, learn how to use the blade tool or whatever it's called in your software, how to cut clips and move clips around, and then you officially know video editing. You can worry about a bunch of stuff later. Those are the two I recommend learning right now just to get started, and then you're good to go. So that said, a few more things. There are lots of cool effects, like I was going to show you one. I'm not going to do it right now, but like a zoom in effect or like a magnifying glass effect or crazy transitions and all sorts of stuff. A lot of times you can actually just go buy little presets and then download them and then just start using them. They're like drag and drops. Like you don't need to learn anything super fancy. You just find the effects, you drag it onto your timeline. It's the same thing in like DaVinci Resolve and everything. And then boom, or whatever. I will think of a bunch of titles. That was a weird like little flashy thing. This is just an example. There are like hundreds of these. I bought one called MTuber 2 actually. It's $100 and it came with like 50 different like transitions and effects, and somewhere on here it'll actually show them. Oh yeah. So there's like subscribe notifications and social media things like this. And there's a ton of logo animations where you don't have to actually create a fancy pants animation. You just drag and drop your logo into these little preset things, pre-made things, and then they just work. Pointers, magnifying glass, just lots of cool effects. You can just go buy these. This is only one example. There's a ton of these sorts of things. I recommend going and Googling Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, whatever your editing software is, Final Cut Pro templates. Or sometimes they call them generators. Templates generators, it'll bring up sort of the same sort of thing, generators. Some are free, some are paid, and there you go. Moving on. All right, so let's talk about a strategy for what to edit. So obviously your podcast is your podcast, and that's up to you how to edit a podcast. But when it comes to video, especially if you're recording new video, like intros and outros to accompany your podcast episode or whatever, I recommend keeping it short and snappy. Meaning when you go in your editing tool, take out silence. Take out dead time. You see how I am talking pretty slow and there's a pretty decent amount of dead time? You just lose users. It's YouTube, man. People don't listen like they do to a podcast. They're out. They're leaving. They're like, this is too slow for me. I'm moving on. Not everybody's like that, but a lot of people that watch YouTube videos are. So I recommend editing to keep it short and snappy. And if you're not a fast talker, you might want to consider being like high energy and talking a little bit faster than you might normally otherwise would have, just to make sure that people are staying nice and engaged. You see what I did there? I talked like a little bit faster than I normally do. That's my strategy for editing. I usually come in here, I will, again, this is Final Cut Pro, but you can do this with any tool. I will usually change my view so that I can see a little bit more of the audio waveforms, like that right there. And you can actually zoom in, zoom out. Again, you gotta learn this in your own DAW. I'm not gonna teach you how to do these things or shortcuts or whatever. I usually do that, and then I will find like the dead space, and maybe I'll use like the blade tool, and then I'll like cut this part out, move this over. You'll have to learn how to do this. You'll have to learn how to cut using your own software, but I'll do stuff like that and just remove the like dead times, remove the silence, remove the silence. That's generally like where I start with editing any video. All right. That's just one little quick strategy. All right, 2 more things, and then this is it. Color correction. I don't want to talk about color grading. Color grading means making it look more like a movie. Let's take this clip right here. This is actually a finished clip. I should have, let's just remove these, actually. Sorry. Give me a second. Let me just bring in like a raw clip right here. How about YouTube? Okay, here we go. And here we go. I'm just gonna bring in one of these right here. This one's good. All right, drag it in. Boop. Just so we can just see right here. So you see I have like lots of dead time and silence in between like recording. That's generally what I would take out, by the way. All right, so here is what I shot. That actually looks pretty good because I set my custom white balance and I have good lighting. So I don't actually need to do any color correction here, but let's say my lighting was bad or blue, like one of these videos in this course that I already had, etc. Learning how to color correct is generally a good thing to do. And my one tip here, and I even wrote this down, just make it look good. Make it look right. You can generally tell by looking at this, like, it looks a little yellow. It looks a little blue. It looks a little orange. It looks kind of pink. For me, just looking through here, I think it looks good, by the way. I think it looks fine, but maybe a little bit less pink. You see how like my arm and my face, like I have that pink and magenta light on. I might want to like change that. So I recommend figuring out where to find a color wheel or a color bar. There's lots of different things. Color board, color wheels, color curves. All these do the same things. They just have a different interface. This is Final Cut Pro. I'm not going to get too deep into color correction here, but what I usually do is I usually do color wheels or color board. I'm going to do a color board right here. It gives me this thing right here. This shows me a master, a shadows, darks, a midtones, and then a highlights. And I generally just play around with this until I get what I want. Obviously, I don't do it that much, but let's say I wanted to take out some of the pink, like magenta color up in here, and that's probably my skin, so it's like a midtone or a highlight. I might just like go up here and try and like pull it down a tiny bit. Make small corrections. Never go too hard, too fast. You can really end up doing like more harm than good by color correcting too fast. So just do like a teeny tiny bit to start with and see if it looks better. You can toggle on and off to see if that stuff looks better. That didn't actually look that much difference in my opinion, but a little bit less yellow maybe. So I'll like bring that to like -2. Might do like a little bit of blues in the background, a tiny bit. That's how I like my videos. So here's before and here's after. It's a very small change, but there you go. Start small and then you can go from there. One other tip I have is to figure out where you can add more contrast and or exposure. Just Google it. Again, I'm not teaching you how to do this in your own video editor. You're gonna have to figure that out. But for me, exposure is where I do it right here in that same color board. I can also add another color board if I want to. It shows that in Final Cut Pro right here, color board 1, color board 2. A little exposure. So I will do up in the whites. I never do this much, by the way, but I'm exaggerating, and down. So I want more contrast. Not this much, just a teeny tiny bit. So what I usually do is like -1 or 2 for the blacks, make the darks darker and the lights lighter. I might do just a tiny bit. This makes it a little bit more vivid. Again, you can't even really tell right here, but just a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more pop. Okay, so that's it. I want to talk about exporting, but that's it. I always suggest doing, honestly, 1080p versus 4K video. 1080p is just like the pixels, like the size and the clarity of the video, the resolution. That's the word I was looking for, not clarity. Anyways, 1080p is what I usually do. I do 4K videos every now and then. I always export MP4 files. You can do a lot of different stuff. Here's my export screen in Final Cut Pro. I'm just gonna go to settings and, oh, I don't know why that was selected. See, my resolution was like 720p. That's the 720 right there. 1080p. All right. And then you could do probably video and audio. That's weird. It's MP4. It's just kind of by default. Sometimes you just have like a drop down menu where you can choose a .mp4. That's the file extension of the video. That's what I always do. There are different options out there, but I just recommend doing that. Also, if you ever see a codec, video codec, I recommend just doing H.264. It's the standard. You're not going to find a whole lot of people telling you to do otherwise, really. I'm not going to get into the details. That is pretty fancy pants stuff. I always just do H.264 as my codec. That's it. I never think about it. Never think about it. I don't touch it. There you go. Color space, again, I'm not going to go into the details either. I just do the default from Final Cut Pro. I recommend you just kind of take the default, whatever you can. In DaVinci Resolve, there's like a whole screen for like YouTube, like exporting for YouTube. And if you do that, it'll likely pop up these settings by default. I'm gonna do that in Final Cut Pro. I've never done this, but let's see what that says. So YouTube, it says .mov, like a .mov. And I'm sure I could change that. So I want to do 1080p, HD. Yep, okay, Rec 709. I don't know what any of this stuff is. I don't know why it's doing a .mov file. That's just what comes up by default in Final Cut Pro, I think. But I always do something different. You can click Learn More. I don't really know why it does that, but there you go. Okay, that's all I got, I believe. Yes, that is all I got. All right, see you in the next video.